Alrighty, today's video will be about bow waves, which is something that you make when you swim on top of the water. First up, we'll go through kind of the analogy of a ship that's moving through the water. And so notice, I'll put up a video of that right to the left of me. Notice the wave that it makes at the front of the boat, which is called the bow. And what does it mean for the ship that's making that wave? It means that they have to use more fuel to be pushing through the water, and with everything else equal, that means that the boat will move slower through the water compared to a boat that doesn't make as much of a bow wave. And so there are also other forms of drag which will slow you down in the water if we convert this back to swimming, and those are pressure drag and friction drag. So how do bow waves affect you as you're swimming in the water, and where do you make these waves? If you're on top and swimming relatively flat on top of the water, you'll be making a bow wave usually with your head, as it starts with your head, and that's the first part which breaks the water, and sometimes your shoulder as you're rotating over, especially in freestyle. One way to visualize this is about thinking about your streamlines. Do you streamline above the water or under it? And which one is the most efficient? And if you've thought of the right answer, it's definitely the one that's under the water, because there's one less type of drag that's holding you back, and you only have to deal with pressure drag and skid friction drag. So similarly, okay, I'm gonna restart that one. Similarly to streamlines, if you swim lower in the water with your head under at the most propulsive part of your stroke, so for example, if you had a loping freestyle stroke where your propulsive sections would be where you push your head under the water, then that means you'll be able to take advantage of the reduced amount of wave drag that you're making if you're just pushing and making a large wave. And some studies do claim that wave drag makes up for around 50 to 60% of drag at race pace speed. And so making sure that your technique is able to minimize this type of drag is really important. Some examples of where you might find bow waves are if you have a consistently high head position in freestyle. So that's kind of like when you're looking at 45 degrees ahead. And whilst that's a good position to assume like a high posture in the water, if you're constantly going at that degree of angle, then you'll be making a big wave that comes over consistently, which will slow you down. And another time when this could happen is in the breaststroke glide, if your head isn't streamlined properly. So getting into that streamline, getting under the wave, that'd be very important, especially because when you get into the streamline, that's when you're doing your kick. And if we've learned anything from the previous videos or previous studies we've read, it's that the kick is at the most propulsive part of your stroke. So you need to make sure your head is down before you're getting into that streamline. And third is during butterfly, if your head is high in the water during the propulsive phase. So kind of when you're pushing through the water with your arms and your head is flat on top of the water, you'll be slowing down a lot. You might not immediately feel it or kind of believe that this type of bow wave thing is affecting you, but if you've been swimming the same technique since you've learned how to swim, then you wouldn't really understand whether it's slowing you down or if it's not slowing you down at all. And so that's because everything you've been currently doing feels normal, and the changes which you haven't done, you wouldn't know if they've helped or not. Alright, so in this part of the video, we'll go through all 4 strokes and how we can minimize bow waves in all of these strokes. We'll start off with freestyle, which is also called front crawl. And so in freestyle, we often choose to have the head position between 45 degrees looking forward to straight down, somewhere between that. And so as it turns out, at 45 degrees, we've already mentioned before, your head is making quite the bow wave in the water because your forehead is pushing through it. And to see some good examples of head positioning to reduce bow waves, we can look at swimmers who compete in the 800 to 1500 meter freestyle distances. And it seems to me, what I can see is that the longer distances, the priority is to decrease the amount of drag that you make and improve your efficiency, rather than sprinters in sprint races who prioritize propulsion. And so if we look at some clips here, you'll see some people swimming 1500 meter races. You'll see that they spend a lot more time in the glide section. And in the glide section, of course, you've got to make sure you're as streamlined as you can. And if you have your head on top of the water during that streamline, it's a little bit inefficient compared to having it under the water. Right, and as you can see, we'll just keep having this clip up. Regardless of their stroke pattern, you can see at the fastest part of their stroke, when they enter the water or when they finish the breath, they push their head fully under. And this is really important because reducing drag means that the propulsion will be more effective. So overall, because the head is further down in the water, the hips also come up, which means that the body is more streamlined overall. So adding 2 and 2 together, the actionable step here is that if you're swimming longer distances, you'll want to spend your glide, especially in freestyle and even in other strokes as well, with your head and your body under the water. And you can practice this by pushing your head down after you finish your breaststroke, which is pretty much applicable to freestyle, butterfly and breaststroke. Backstroke's a bit odd, but we'll move on from that. This is because you can use the momentum that you get from the propulsion coming from the other hand and push yourself forward and get under the surface of the water. Alright, so moving on to butterfly, you want to make sure that you minimize the amount of drag that you're having on top of your body when you're in your glide and recovery. So what you can do to solve this problem is to kick down deeper in the water. And so this is similar to breaststroke downwards kick, where when you kick downwards, your hips will come up. And so the opposite end of your body, which is your upper body, will be forced to a lower position. And so having that deeper kick will make sure that you can spend more of your propulsive sections from your kick down into a lower position under the water. Next up, we have the backstroke. And so I find that this is a little bit more difficult to apply the bow wave concept to, but it really does just remain the same in that if you're doing more sprints and shorter distances, you want to be prioritizing getting your body and especially your head to be going on top of the water and not pushing through it. But the more difficult part comes when you're doing longer distances, such as 200 backstroke, and you want to have a lower position in the water to reduce your bow wave. And so one idea that I've kind of thought of in making this video is that you could hold your breath and get under the water whilst you're doing your 3 strokes and come up and breathe and go straight back down. And so you can do this in kind of a loping stroke where you maximize your propulsion by getting under the water, kind of like this far. And then that may help, but of course it's never really been tried out. No one ever does it in race technique, but it could possibly work, and that's something to look into. And last but not least, we have the breaststroke. And so in essence, the goal is to move your body as fast as possible into the recovery position of breaststroke, whilst you minimize the amount of water that you take forward with you, and that's drag. And by doing this, you set yourself up for a powerful glide because your kick will be really effective. So if you're already in the streamline before you kick, that means that you'll be going through the water in such a tight position. Again, how does the water see you in that kind of front ways view? For example, if you're too slow getting into the streamline, you'll be like this and kicking forward. And at this point, you're pretty wide, and so that kick won't be as effective. One of the key focuses you must implement inside this shooting forward phase of breaststroke is to have your head naturally drop into the streamline. Right? One way to make sure this happens is to, of course, kick downwards, because the further down you can kick in breaststroke, the higher your hips will go, and so your head would naturally drop down. And so now we're at the summary of this video. we've just gone through some of the ways which bow waves can slow you down in the water. Because of this, the overall thinking for improvement in all strokes is that when you're at the most propulsive part of your stroke phase, get yourself in a streamlined position and under the water so that you make less of a bow wave, and that effectively cancels out or reduces one of the three types of drag that you make in the water, which again, one of them is bow wave, the other one's pressure drag, and the other one is skin friction drag. Just as a parting comment, prioritize your effort over everything else. So in terms of the technique that you learn in watching these videos, that's important, but the most important thing is the effort that you actually put in. So and that just links back to the why. So you've got to ask yourself that as well. Why do you train? Why do you do that? Okay.